Hello, good morning. Welcome, Excellency. Welcome to the Ambassadors Forum organized by the School of International Service. We are grateful to you, Excellency, the Ambassador from Pakistan to the United States, Dr. Asad Khan. We are particularly grateful knowing how busy you are in spite of COVID. You're in great demand to be on this lecture circuit. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our Dean of the school, and Kate, who's organized this event and put it together so magnificently. Now, we will be running exactly on time, a 1 hour session, 11 to 12. The first 20 minutes, 15 minutes, you will present your thoughts and ideas. The second session of this 1 hour will be you and me talking, perhaps expanding on some of the themes you raised. And the final 1/3 will be the Q&A, people asking questions, and we'll see them. And perhaps we won't have time for all the questions because I believe there are already some 260 people who've logged in and signed in and registered for your talk. You can see how popular you are. So before I ask you to speak, I do want to very briefly introduce you. You are, to my estimation, a star of the Pakistan Foreign Office. You held key appointments in Pakistan at the presidency as additional secretary in the Foreign Office. You've been ambassador in Japan. You've been DCM in Washington, the embassy here. And now you're, of course, ambassador. And along the way, you picked up a PhD. So a classic scholar diplomat of the old style. And I know that Pakistanis are very proud of you. So thank you so much for coming, Excellency. And with that, let me request you to give us your presentation.
Thank you very much. Very good morning to you, Master Ahmed, and to your colleagues at American University. I'm very thankful to the School of International Service for organizing this conversation and to have that many number of listeners tuning in this morning. I'm indeed honored and very happy to be part of this exchange. Thank you very much.
Excellency, it's your star power. You know, they call the star pull that you have.
You know, well, you have over the years inspired, several generations of Pakistani civil servants and diplomats alike through your example, I must say, and thank you very much. For your leadership in academia and also on the diplomatic front. So it is a personal honor for me also to be part of this conversation and to share the frame with you. So I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Thank you.
We are actually, I think, living through very unusual, extraordinary, unprecedented times, you know. So I would be remiss if I do not start my presentation this morning by alluding to the common challenge that the entire humanity is facing, and which is COVID. For a change, this is a crisis and a challenge that threatens both the rich and the poor in terms of states and countries, but also within societies, you know, except that the poor amongst us and those who have underlying conditions are more vulnerable than the others, you know. So obviously for Pakistan, with our fragile health system to begin with, we were faced with a very difficult situation, I would say back in January or February. I think we have done a reasonably good job in terms of dealing with this very unusual and extraordinary situation. And we did that by basically, because as we speak today, the number of infections for a country which is the 5th or the 6th largest country in the world with about 220 million population, you know, our total infections as of this morning is around, I think, 253,000. And the number of casualties are little over 5,000. So we have, through effective quarantine measures, you know, we were very quick to come in and basically freeze our borders, to take measures in terms of uh, you know, taking our school, closing the schools, the offices and all of that. So all those measures, and even after that, you know, I traveled to Pakistan sometime in February. And at that time, I did not have to go through any temperature checks or any other procedures here at the US airport, even when I came back a few weeks later. But in Pakistan, all those procedures were in place. So those measures, and plus lately what we have done is that we have introduced these smart lockdowns, where certain cities where we have those hotspots from where most infections were being reported, you know, they were focused. That has clearly, I think, has had an impact. And the rate of infection has gone down. The rate of casualties has gone down. And not just that, I think we also use this time period to develop indigenous capacity to produce the personal protective equipment, to produce ventilators. I can happily report that Pakistan has actually developed, it may be rudimentary, but we have our own breathing machines available in Pakistan. So the domestic production has also been geared to meet these challenges, and then educating the masses. I think there is absolutely no other way but to adhere to the guidelines, to discipline yourself for the sake of your own family and your own self, but also for the sake of your community. And that's where, you know, I think government has, I mean, of course, we have different levels, you know, and the biggest challenge for the government in Pakistan was that for a poor country, where we have millions of daily wages, you know, who have to go out to work to bring back food on the table, you know. That challenge, and I'm sure you must have seen the Oxfam report, where it is feared that perhaps the number of people dying out of hunger because of COVID will be more than those who would actually die because of the disease itself. So that's a challenge, I think, for poor countries. And we are trying to deal with that. I'll be happy to discuss that further. We live in a tough neighborhood, Ambassador Ahmed, as you know well. Unfortunately, this August, Kashmir will complete actually 1 full year of a complete lockdown, you know. And back in January, you know, we thought that in sympathy with Kashmiri people, you know, India might relent and relax the lockdown, but unfortunately, they actually doubled down on it in terms of putting in place more restrictions, placing more people under arrest, and using more violence. Clearly, the use of force and violence, unfortunately, has not worked. Today, Kashmir is the largest prison on earth, and it clearly is a burden on the conscience of the international community. And for us, the challenge is that India not only has increased its repression in Kashmir, but has also escalated the line of control. The number of casualties, the daily exchanges since January, there have been close to around 1,600 cross LOC violations by India. So clearly, Kashmir today is a hotspot. Kashmir today is a flashpoint. The situation there threatens peace, security, and stability for South Asia, and some of the other recent developments have only added to the sense of crisis that we have in the region. Unfortunately, international community has not given as much attention as this region deserves, because this is a place where you have 3 nuclear powers sitting next to each other, and in a kind of a de facto conflict situation, you know. This should be a cause of alarm for countries around the world. And I think on top of that, for Kashmiris, the challenge is that their identity has been taken away. There is a concerted effort to basically bring in more people and to change the demographics of Kashmir, something that we have been pointing out for a long time. So the Eastern Front is a challenge that we are facing. And this is a situation that we have to deal with. And I think international community must rise to the occasion to urge India to engage and to seek resolution of this longest outstanding dispute on the UN Security Council agenda. On the Western Front, happily, we are witnessing some good developments. The finalization of peace agreement between US and Taliban has opened the way for intra-Afghan dialogue process. We have done our bit in terms of facilitating that process. We will continue to support that. We are hopeful that, intra-Afghan peace process would start soon. So we will have at least a border which is safe and secure. On the bilateral relationship, I think it's been a good year. And we have covered a lot of ground. But clearly, there is a lot more to be covered. And I'll be happy to further discuss that as we go into our conversation. So I think I'll just stop here. I know I have a lot to learn from you also, so I'd like to hear your insights and perspectives on some of the things that I have said, and then I'll be happy to engage in a conversation.
Thank you, Excellency. You've given us a short but succinct and insightful frame within which to discuss some really key points. Your first point on COVID fascinates me because paradoxically, here you have the United States where we are both located and situated with all the facilities, the most advanced society on earth, and as we are often reminded, one of the greatest nations in the history of mankind. And there you have Pakistan, which is still struggling, a middle-level country with potential, but still a long way to go. The paradox, the irony of Pakistan doing relatively well, compared to the United States, where we still have this intense debate about to open, not to open, to wear a mask, not to wear a mask. The divisions we see in the leadership in America, one individual pointing to one direction and the other one to another direction. The debate we're having on schools, do we open the schools? Do we risk precious, valuable school children and expose them perhaps to this terrible virus? All these great issues are raised by your commentary. So I want to ask you with humility, what advice would you have for our American friends and colleagues that they can learn from the Pakistan experience?
Well, first of all, I think...
and let me say, this is not a setup question. This is coming after your talk.
No, but I think we are all in it together. The bottom line is, and as I said, be it a family or a community or be it the community of nations, if I am able to deal with Corona at my place, then my neighbor is safer and securer. And frankly, as I began by saying that this is unique, this is unprecedented. We are all learning by doing things. Some countries may have made more mistakes than the others. But as long as, actions are being taken in good faith with the objective of protecting our communities, protecting our population, I could still basically, and in Pakistan also, I think we have covered this journey by having our own issues and problems as well. And the government, and frankly, I think for any political leader, it's a tough call, it's a tough choice to make in terms of protecting the livelihood of the population, because leaders have to take care of their people. And while we are trying to deal with the disease, if in that process, and particularly in Pakistan. So I think what we have done in Pakistan, which is significant and important, is to educate the population, to instill that sense of fear. Because frankly, the only thing that is working is basically making people observe and adhere to the guidelines. And those public campaigns and examples by leaders, and at the local level also helped a lot. The second is that political divide. I think be it the provincial government, be it the federal government, and in some cases there were two different parties. But through that national coordination committee, everyone came together. And
Here's one example of a government really forming alliances with the opposition in order to tackle what is a mutual problem for the whole of society.
yes. So we
It's
really
crucial.
need to rise above politics. We need to rise above, our own limited parochial view of the situation, and take a holistic national view, and not just a national view, but an international view of how to deal with it.
Yes, yes, exactly. So we can, as you said, this is a mutual problem. All societies are facing it, big societies, small societies. The rich are facing it. You must have heard just recently that the most famous stars from India, Amitabh Bachchan, his son and his daughter-in-law, these are superstars. All of them are down with this terrible disease. So it does strike anyone at any time, and we need to really understand ourselves as a common humanity facing a global threat, not in terms of this country or that country. I think this is a very important lesson to learn in the middle of this crisis. Now,
And frankly, if I may, because I think, of course, that's the problem that we have at hand. But the medium and longer term challenge is going to be our ability and ability of countries to deal with the economic impact of the corona crisis. And that's where I think there will be even greater need, because whatever economic prescriptions governments would come up with, those prescriptions will come under scrutiny by the opposition, and that's where we as countries and societies will have to develop national consensus in terms of the best way forward. Because if we keep fighting over the prescriptions, the solutions will only get delayed, and delay is a killer when it comes to corona crisis.
yes, coronavirus is it's a deadly enemy. Now, do you find that the opposition and the government are working in tandem with a fair amount of harmony in dealing with this issue, or do you still find the politics is interfering?
I would say, as I said, that the results that we are seeing are results that are consistent across Pakistan, which is, I think, a clear sign of everyone working together. And the national coordination is also taking place on a regular basis. And as a vibrant democracy, there are always different opinions on issues as important as COVID, so we do hear noise here and there, but that does not mean that the system is not coming together to work to deal with this challenge. So I would say that as a democracy, we have shown that flexibility as a political system to be together to deal with the challenges. There are difference of opinions, and parties do have their own way of looking at various solutions and prescriptions being suggested or implemented. But at the end of the day, everyone is in it together.
Well, this leads me to another point that you raised. You talked about Kashmir. You talked about the dire situation there, lockdown for 1 year. You talked about the tension between India and Pakistan, and now with the China-India confrontation in the Himalayas, a third element in this crisis in South Asia. My question is a big picture question, and to you as both an ambassador and as a philosopher. The question is that, and this is my first question, it's coming in from Khalid Salam in Lahore, an old school fellow of mine from Burn Hall in Ahmedabad. He's asking that India has produced some of the great Sufi saints, Moinuddin Chishti, Nizamuddin Aulia, very famous names. So why can't their philosophy of peace and compassion have an impact on the hatred and the violence that is now so widespread in India? And I want to add to this because as a scholar of religion, I find that the concepts of Shanti, which is peace, Ahimsa, which is non-violence, these are very deep-rooted in the Sanskritic religions. In fact, Buddha symbolizes Mahavira, Buddha, Ashoka. So why are these great concepts that India contributed to the whole world, why are they failing now to check the violence and the hatred which you are seeing spilling into the situation in Kashmir and elsewhere?
Oh, that's a tough one. And we are as much inheritors of that great Sufi tradition in Pakistan as India of today is. And it pains my heart, actually, frankly, and it is unfortunately ironical. And I look at it more in terms of the political developments over the last at least 2 years. Because I don't know if you remember when Prime Minister, even before taking over as Prime Minister, one of the first things he did was to extend this hand of friendship to India. And he clearly said that, you take one step, I'm going to take two. And he said it publicly here also, and in other places as well, that, he knows he's probably one Pakistani leader who has a huge fan base in India also. And that he would like to count on that to build friendship between two countries. Unfortunately, most of that, those gestures were not reciprocated by India. And not just that, Pulwama happened, and we kept telling the world that, look, there was no terrorist camp, as is being claimed, there were no strikes, there were no hundreds of terrorists dead. In hindsight, everyone knows today that most of those claims were false. Then August 5 happened, we told the world that, this is being done to basically implement a long-standing BJP and Prime Minister Modi's agenda, that India wants to change the demography of Kashmir. 1 year down the road, they have repealed those laws, they have brought in new laws, they repealed 35A. And just about a few weeks ago, they gave domicile to 25,000 Indian nationals domicile for Kashmir. So really, I think, and if you look at what Prime Minister Modi stands for, and if you look at his political career over the last 20, 30 years, you would see a consistent pattern, which is frankly a deviation from those ideals of peace that India stood for. And that is something that we have tried to see. And frankly, even today, we firmly believe that there is absolutely no other way but dialogue and engagement to resolve these issues. And Kashmir, and not just Kashmir, resolving all other issues. But India doesn't seem to, and that perhaps has more to do with a political party, with a political ideology that thrives on division, that thrives on exclusion, and that basically draws energy from drawing lines, and it is, I say, ironical because we have a leader who believes in dialogue and engagement. And it's not just one political party in Pakistan, Ambassador Ahmed. I think you are a keen observer of Pakistan's political scene. I think across the board, our major mainstream political parties have demonstrated a desire to seek full normalization of relations with India. And even now, I give you two very important examples. even as we speak, Kartarpur corridor, when our borders are frozen, but in deference to the religious sentiments of Sikhs, we of community from Punjab, we have basically notified India of our desire to open the Kartarpur corridor. We have even, as part of our engagement with Afghanistan, we have allowed the transit trade to India from Afghanistan. These are small gestures, but these are very important, significant gestures. And Kartarpur happened in an environment where, unfortunately, BJP and Prime Minister Modi used Pakistan as a punching bag to establish himself politically to get another term. And that's playing out again. So India and even if you look at the Religious Freedom Report, and it's not what we are saying. I mean, you look at the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, you look at the European Parliament's resolutions, you look at OIC reports, all there are, and Amnesty International, they are talking about India and minorities being under attack, and Kashmir was just the beginning. So I really hope, more as a citizen of South Asia, that some sense would prevail, that India would show large-heartedness, would have an open mind. Force and unilateralism is not the way out. Due process, rule of law, and showing sympathy and empathy to the poor and the weak, be it their own minority, or be it the Kashmiris under occupation, or be it in relationship to the smaller neighbors, this will have to change if we want to see peace in South Asia.
Well, thank you for that, Excellency. In fact, you pointed out the Prime Minister's determined efforts, and he deserves full marks for Kartarpur, where he's allowed the Sikhs to really return home to what are their most precious sites. People don't fully appreciate that Pakistan is the home of some world religions like the Sikhs, that some of the great classic drama that you see in the Hindu sacred texts, these were played out in what is now Pakistan. The Taxila was one of the greatest Buddhist universities in the world then, thousands of years ago. So Pakistan has very deep connections with the great history of South Asia, its religions and its culture. And as you rightly said, Pakistan has a very deep tradition of mysticism, Sufism, and inclusive Islam, with great names like Shah Abdul Latif Bhai in Sindh, the Bulle Shah in the Punjab, Data Ganj Bakhsh. And I think this is where we have very strong links across the border in India. And this is where I think the diplomats like you, need to constantly remind both countries that the notion of shanti, of ahimsa, non-violence, are really mutual, and we need to develop them, because we cannot have this continued confrontation, which may, God forbid, lead the two nations into nuclear confrontation and perhaps a nuclear exchange, the first of its kind in world history, which we think in South Asia will be limited to South Asia, maybe damage the other side. But we don't realize that this will immediately pull in the rest of the world and could actually destroy the planet as we know it. So this is something which I take very seriously. I'm in that sense a pacifist. I want the integrity of both countries to be preserved, but also both countries to be aware of what great dangers are being posed by both countries being at the brink of a nuclear exchange. So I think this will help if we know that behind us, behind our histories, we do have these great figures which we share and who have promoted Shanti and ahimsa and notions like that.
I agree. As I said, I think we owe this to our people. And I will once again refer to something that the Prime Minister said, that instead of fighting each other, we need to fight poverty. Because we have some of the largest number of people living below the poverty line in South Asia. So that's where the conversation needs to start, and also in terms of undoing the injustice that has been done, and this attempt to get your way through force is disturbing the peaceful environment in South Asia. It has not worked in the past. I don't think it is going to work in future.
And you raised the issue of Kashmir. I think it'd be very useful for our participants, people who are joining us today, to know very, very briefly what is the background to Kashmir. Because what we know now, as you've pointed out, that we are one region of the world, unique, it's absolutely unique, where three nuclear powers, China, India, and Pakistan, not only have adjoining borders, but have direct political, social, and religious links and interests. And so therefore you have an immediate explosive flashpoint, which at any time could drag Asia and the rest of the world into a dangerous direction. So what is the background? What are the key issues? Why is there so much controversy and debate and now so much violence that we are aware of coming out of Kashmir? So very briefly, if you could explain it to our participants, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Kashmir is actually the leftover agenda of the partition of British India. And at the time of partition in 1947, the British had actually given all the princely states the option of choosing one or the other independent dominion, which was India and Pakistan. And in deciding that, the rulers of those states had to take into account the wishes of the people of the state. And that's where the contention and controversy began. And it was actually India that went to the UN Security Council. And this is the Kashmir is a dispute before the UN Security Council. There are several resolutions that have still not been implemented. We have some part of Kashmir on our side, which is we call it the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is, if translated into English, is independent Jammu and Kashmir, which was basically liberated through an indigenous movement. And people of Kashmir have, over the last 70 years, not accepted. And this actually in some ways even goes back to before the partition also, because 13th July is the Martyrs' Day. So this has been a dispute. Kashmiris have, over the last 70 years, constantly expressed a desire to exercise their right of self-determination, which have been denied to them. Our stance is very simple. Pakistan wants that the people of Kashmir should be given the right to exercise that choice, which was given to them in terms of choosing to join either India or choosing to join either Pakistan. And that right has not been, unfortunately, given to India. That has resulted in a lot of violence. So what we are asking is that the UN Security Council, and it's not just the UN Security Council resolutions, even in our bilateral agreements also with India, Kashmir has always been recognized as a disputed territory. Even the Article 370 in a way was a recognition in the Indian constitution and reflection of the commitments that Indian leaders had made to the people of Kashmir in terms of giving them that special status until the final disposition of the status of the valley. So this is a dispute that needs resolution. There is enough legal basis available for the international community to help and facilitate that. Only if India were to show some inclination to seek resolution.
Well, you also expressed some frustration at the general indifference of the world to this genuine crisis, which carries so much potential for such grave dangers. How do you explain that? We have these movements taking place right now, long overdue, and thankfully their problems are now coming to light. For example, the Black Lives Matter, etc., so that peoples who have not been given their due and their rights over the last few decades are now being recognized. How do you then account for our region being neglected by the world in terms of human rights, in terms of these movements, in terms of just basic human decency?
I think it's unfortunate. That's why I would say that it is actually a burden. The situation in Kashmir and the repression that they face and the lack of attention, unfortunately, is a burden on the conscience of international community. You give me another place or another example where a whole territory has been converted into a prison that is incarcerating over 8 million people. And it has been going on now for close to a year. On August 5, it will be, and it's not, there was a lockdown and then that lockdown was doubled up by the COVID lockdown. And thousands of Kashmiris. And then on top of that, the repression has increased. There are these so-called search operations. There are these, fake encounters, use of pellet guns. None of that gets the kind of attention. Although I must say in the United States, because I have a long association with working in United States, you could see that the media came out paying a lot of attention as compared to before. Then we also saw the Congress convening a special hearing on the human rights situation in Kashmir. We also saw the Lantos Commission basically convening. There were about 57 US congressmen and senators who wrote and publicly expressed concern. I think it was unprecedented for 37 US congressmen to write to the US permanent representative to the United Nations, conveying their concern on the situation. So I'm not saying that there hasn't been any concern, but I would say that it has not been as much as it should have been. Yes. And given the level of repression that we have seen over the last 1 year. I mean, just
unfortunately, we are running out of our segment. But before we go into the Q&A, I want to wrap our conversation up with the question. You mentioned Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, having a fan base in India and other places. One of his fans seems to be the President of the United States in the White House, because he called him great, a great sportsman. He called his country great and so on. So the atmosphere between the US and Pakistan certainly seems to have improved. A very brief comment. How is Pakistan balancing its need and its relationship with the United States on the one hand and with China on the other? It's a difficult balancing act. How do you think it's doing?
I think we are doing fairly well, and something that we have historically done. I mean, we have always had a good relationship with both China and United States. And President Trump and Prime Minister have had 3 summit meetings, which in some ways is also a record for them to have met 3 times in a short span of just about 6 months, and each meeting was warmer than the one before, and you could see that reflected in the state of relationship today. I think our relationship is in a much better place. And I believe, and I think for us in Islamabad, we don't want to be seen through the prism of any other capital ambassador, be it Beijing, be it New Delhi, be it any other country, or Kabul also. We are a significant country in our own right. We are a fifth or the sixth largest country in the world, a nuclear power, and a long history of cooperation with the United States. And I think we can have, and our two countries have contributed significantly in promoting peace and stability whenever we have worked together. So that gives us a strong and solid basis to work and don't rely on any other relationship.
I think that's a very positive statement, Excellency, and very well summed up. And we are now ready to move into the third and final segment of our conversation. I hope we haven't tired you out too much.
No, not at all.
Great global issues.
Warming up. Warming up.
Well, we have lots of questions, so let me just take at random. There's one straight in front of me. It says, thank you, ambassadors, for the intriguing discussion. While we know that there are problems occurring in Kashmir, I wanted to point out another region in Pakistan with recurring problems, and that is Sindh. In the province, according to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, November 2018, a total of 5,290 cases have been received on cases of enforced disappearance in the country. There have been recent reports of enforced disappearances in Sindh recently. On July the 7th, a 20-year-old student named Akib Chandio was abducted and disappeared at around 4:30 in the morning. What can Pakistan do to find Chandio and bring him back safely while ensuring that enforced disappearances in Pakistan are being investigated upon?
First of all, I think I don't know how and from where these statistics have been obtained. In Sindh, all the laws of and all the fundamental freedoms as protected and provided in the Constitution of Pakistan are available. There are no suspensions in place, as are in place in some of the other, particularly in Kashmir that I was alluding. So it's really basically absolutely no comparison between the two situations. Secondly, I think if you track developments in Pakistan closely, our media, which has access, our courts, which are not just independent, but they like to exercise that independence also.
Aggressively independent.
Well, I can't say that. But what I can tell you that every single case of disappearance that has been reported in the media has been done by the local stringers, by the local correspondents, by people living in communities. And where the courts have also taken note of that. I have heard about this particular case only yesterday. We are looking into this disappearance and we will find out, but I can't say or comment on the details of what happened and in what circumstances. But in principle, the courts are there, the media is there, all the remedies are available, no laws are suspended, So this number that is being quoted, I think is not correct. Secondly, if there are any cases, all those individuals have all the remedies that are available in law.
Available. Well, the other question which I want to pose to you, sent from one of our participants, is very interesting, and I think it links up with the discussion we had. It says, thank you for your comments, Ambassador Khan. How do you see the role of young overseas Pakistanis and Indians? And it points out who generally have an easier time surfacing our common culture. So this question is, we have overseas Indians, Pakistanis who have a common culture. The language is familiar, the food and the customs and so on. How do we access this to further peace between the two countries? More specifically, how is Pakistan tapping into this pool to further peace?
I I think that's a huge resource, increasingly untapped, if I may say so, in terms of bringing our two countries together in building those people-to-people bridges. Frankly, and that's again another dimension of how, unfortunately, BJP and the Hindutva agenda that they have advocated has moved this whole thing away. And I take you back to the Pulwama crisis, where a national frenzy was built to demonize Pakistan and everything Pakistani. And that obviously leaves a certain bitterness with everyone at the popular level also. We used to have, I mean, India was the first to basically refuse visas, not just to our actors and singers, but to also those who wanted to go across to get some medical treatment. So by closing all these avenues and building up this public frenzy and demonizing a country and a people, I think BJP has done a great disservice to the cause of peace in South Asia. And I think those of Pakistanis and Indians living overseas, I think have a special responsibility to use those channels to build those bridges that can help better understand each other's point of view and perspective.
I think that's a very noble appeal, particularly to overseas Indians and Pakistanis, and particularly to the youth, particularly to students, because I find I've got both Indian and Pakistani students in my class, and I find them, they are still idealistic. They want to understand about each other. And they, of course, as you pointed out, exposed to a lot of this fresh propaganda that comes out and which is now filtered into the media, into films, into the public perception of each other, and converted into hatred. So there's a kind of equation taking place in Indian minds between Muslim equals Pakistan, equals terrorism, equals hatred. And I think that's very dangerous. The history of the world tells us that when majority populations focus on a minority, it does not end well. Sooner or later, there's going to be violence and there's going to be terrible tragedies, a lot of pain and a lot of anger. So I think, again, I want to remind our viewers, our participants, that these great concepts coming out of South Asia, which both Indians and Pakistanis share. For Pakistanis, the concept of Sulh Kul, peace with all. The very word salam means peace. These are Pakistani traditions. With India, you have Shanti, you have Ahimsa, these great traditions. We need to be able to remind our youngsters that this is what we share. Why are we throwing it away? Why are we throwing away our legacy? Let us aim for a more ideal and better world. And COVID should challenge us to think along these lines, because COVID is a common enemy to all, whether you're Hindu or Muslim or rich or poor. It faces and destroys everyone in its path. So I think this is a time of great introspection, of great thought, and a great opportunity for us to really go back to our own tradition and think along these lines. Now, again, we are running out of time, so I'll just take one or two last questions. And they really are about China, and one is from Will Shriver at American University. He basically is asking that Pakistan has always been a champion of Muslim populations and causes, but in the case of the Uyghur in China, Pakistan seems to be very much absent, as it were, and looks the other way. And what is the reason for that?
No, I don't think it's a fair description of where we are, and we normally don't comment on the internal situation of other countries, of our friends in particular. To equate our raising of the human rights violations in Kashmir, or the treatment of Muslims in India is very different, because China has never basically raised those issues with us in terms of, and we engage in all kinds of conversations, except that we don't talk about these things publicly, given the state of relationship that we have with China. And again, I think the OIC delegations China has organized, and they have gone and they have seen the situation on the ground, which is not basically consistent with some of what we read here in the newspapers. We feel that there is still a lot more that the world needs to learn about the situation without signing on to this or the other perspective.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we are coming to a close. I would ask you to give us a broad final comment that you think viewers would like to hear. Because, very often in these discussions, I know you're very conscious of this, but we talk about Pakistan like you did. You described Pakistan very well and its importance for your audience here in the United States and elsewhere. It's a country of over 200 million people. It's the only Muslim nuclear country. It's situated in a part of the world, incredibly important geopolitical situation. On the east, you have China, and the south, you have India. On the west, you have Afghanistan, Iran, and the Arab world. My God, it's geopolitically absolutely vital for the United States, for China, for any country in the world interested in geopolitics. But finally, the point that is often overlooked, not by you because you're a scholar, but often overlooked, is the fact that Pakistan was created, the Pakistan movement was led by Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam, who had a vision of the country. He had a vision which we see in his first two speeches in the Constituent Assembly in 1947, when he talks about the rights of Hindus and Christians and Muslims. Hindus are free to go to their temples. He's giving a right and an invitation. He's embracing all of humanity. As long as you're a citizen, you abide by the laws and the regulations, you're welcome to Pakistan. And I think this is crucial because people in the West don't fully understand this very strong democratic basis. And I believe that that is the DNA of every Pakistani, that however much Pakistan struggles between democracy and military rule, but Pakistanis have this compulsion, this inherent compulsion to move towards democracy. And I think it's in the interest of the world to understand this and to promote and help us stay on this path, on this democratic path, by encouraging us through schools, through educations, through reminders of what the Quaid-e-Azam wanted for the country. I don't know what you would think of that, and maybe a comment, and then we could close our session.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I think Pakistan, despite the hiccups that we faced in our journey, we have always returned to the democratic order. Right now, for several years now, we have had a third peaceful democratic transition in Pakistan. And I think what it takes to sustain and consolidate democracy is all there. We have a vibrant civil society. We have institutions that are active and ready and willing to hold the government to account. Media, people talk about freedoms. I think our media is as free as any other media in that part of the world can be. Our judiciary. So all those elements, and a parliament and the political leaders. I give you one example. I mean, you've been in civil service also, and from your time and from my time, even from my time when I joined and today, when we go back, I was surprised to see that we were called to the parliament and made to sit before the parliamentary committee and several committees over a period of a year and a half that I spent in Islamabad. And they would subject us to very aggressive questioning the way they do here in the United States. So what I am very hopeful, it was there in our DNA always. We now have the institutional infrastructure and the social support to sustain that. I think, and I'm quite hopeful. It may be noisy. It may seem disorderly looking at from the perch of a more seasoned and established democracy, but we are going to get there. So I agree with
we are on the right path. We are on
we
the
are
right path
on the right.
eventually.
Yes.
Well, Excellency, it's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure all of those listening and watching what our conversation is like would have learned a great deal and would have understood why I introduced you as a star of the Pakistan Foreign Office. Thank you so much, and we look forward to further conversations like this and to you continuing to interact and enlighten us on your journey. And good luck to you, Excellency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Lovely being with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.